Thank you for joining us. I'm Alicia Smith. I'm the Executive Director of Dyslexia Canada, and I'm joined here today by my wonderful colleague, MJ. The two of us will be helping out in the background. So a few housekeeping items before we get started. The chat is open and we encourage you to use it. Put your comments and questions in the chat. But as I said, it is a very busy Zoom room that we have here tonight with so many wonderful participants joining. So that we ask while you're in this main session, if you can keep yourself muted so that everyone can hear the presenter. And with that, I am going to hand it over to our fantastic host for this series, Melanie Berg. Please welcome. The floor is yours and introduce yourself.
Excellent. Hello, everyone. Before I forget, I want to say that if you want to share this session and share what we're talking about out there in the land of social media, our hashtag will be hashtag LitBC2024. So if somebody can pop that in the chat for me, that would be amazing. All right, so I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that with gratitude and respect, we are coming from a multitude of different places from around British Columbia, and we have special guests from the Yukon as well. And I do want to acknowledge the unceded shared traditional territories across British Columbia on whose lands we live, work, and play. For myself, I am coming to you from Williams Lake, which is the traditional unceded and ancestral territory of the Secwepemc peoples, and specifically the home of the Williams Lake First Nation. And on that note, I do want to also ask people if you'd like to put in your territory acknowledgement into the chat, please feel free to do that at any time. And next up, I want to introduce our very special guest and introduce the Minister of Education and Childcare, the Right Honorable Minister Singh is here to join us. And I know she's very busy. I'm going to turn it right over to her and allow her to give us some remarks.
Thank you so much, Melanie, and hello, everyone. So pleased to be joining you all today. I'm humbly joining you from the shared territories of the Kwantlen, Kwi-Kwetlam, Katsi, and Sami-Emu First Nations. And I'm really thankful to Alicia and Dyslexia Canada for inviting me here today. It is really, I feel really humbled to be with all of you. I really, I'm not here just as the minister, but as a mother whose kids have gone through the public education system. And I feel very strongly that our young people are the future of this province. And it is our responsibility to ensure that they have the tools, they have the skills, that they get those skills to succeed now and into the future. And at its core is this important work that happens most crucially in the thousands of classrooms across the province. And those are your classrooms. That is why our government made the announcement just last month. I know we had the support of Dyslexia Canada. Alicia flew in specially for that event when we announced the significant new investment in literacy supports for our young learners. And this funding will support early literacy screening, interventions, and training for educators. And this early literacy screening in kindergarten up until grade 3 is an important first step to identify students who may be experiencing learning difficulties. And we will work with the school districts to ensure that this implementation is evidence-based. And by providing funding for professional development and training for teachers and support staff, our hope is that educators can build the knowledge, tools, and evidence-based strategies that is needed to support the diverse literacy needs of all students, including those who are beyond grade 3. And I am very much aware that you are attending today's workshop on your own personal time. And I really, really appreciate that all that you are doing, all you educators, what you do every day, and the passion that you bring into your classrooms, and the supports that you are providing to all students, especially the students that have diverse abilities and diverse needs. I believe in the potential of every child in BC, and it really warms my heart to see your dedication and commitment to improving equity through literacy. We know that when children with diverse abilities are well supported, they may experience big improvements in their self-esteem, in their mental health, and in their well-being. But we also know that this initiative will mean big shifts for some school districts and teachers across the province. And the change that we have introduced, it will take some time. But with educators like you taking the lead in your schools and in your communities, I have really high hopes, and I think that the future looks really bright. Thank you once again for inviting me. I really hope that you have wonderful workshops. And once again, a big thank you for all your, I want to say this to Alicia, but also to Dyslexia Canada for your wonderful advocacy for the students throughout this country. And we really, really appreciate all your work. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much for joining us, Minister. We're so grateful that you could spend this time with us, and we will let you get back to your busy evening. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a good one. Bye.
So I'm just going to quickly go through our agenda, and then we will jump right in. So we're going to quickly just I'll introduce myself, and Alicia will talk about a little bit about herself and Dyslexia Canada. And then we'll go over the purpose and goals of this workshop series. We will also do some knowledge building around, and our general topic tonight is the science of reading. What is it? What's it all about? And then we will have a discussion room, opportunity for you to connect with each other and think about some questions that we have formulated for you. And then we have a panel discussion. And tonight we are so honored to welcome the First Nations School Board of the Yukon, representatives from that organization to come and talk to us about the science of reading in their district and what that has meant for them. So this is generally a structure of our sessions throughout the series. So hopefully you will find it fast-paced but engaging. Perky pace, as our Auntie Anita Archer likes to say, we call her. Okay, sorry about this delay. I just don't want to keep clicking it and then have it not go. Oh, and right, how did I forget? Prizes. Stick around to the end because we do have a prize. All right, so a little bit about myself. Actually, before I jump into that, I do want to just quickly say that we have arrived here this evening after many, many years and many, many people advocating in this province for children with dyslexia and children with students with learning disorders of all kinds. And so we're standing on the shoulders of a lot of people that have done a lot of legwork and a lot of work in the field, in classrooms, behind the scenes, and sometimes in front of the scene as well. So I just want to take a moment to acknowledge everyone that has come before, individuals such as Dr. Linda Siegel, Dr. Catherine Garforth, Kathy McMillan in Dyslexia BC, Rick Moore, other individuals from British Columbia, and parents and educators from around the province who have really sought to understand dyslexia and push for effective practices and equity in BC's education system for many, many years. So this is a culmination of all of those efforts, and it's a continuation of those collective efforts that we will have to continue. This is, I think, a monumental time in BC. It's a very important time, but it's also just the beginning in a lot of ways. So I'm very glad that we're seeing the numbers that we are. I'm watching them go up and trying not to feel more nervous. But that's okay. I'm nerve-sighted, right? It's one of my favorite words. So yes, nervous and excited to be here. And just a little bit about myself. If you don't know who I am, I'm a school psychologist at the moment. I was a teacher for a number of years, working in a lot of remote regions, but starting out in the Fraser Valley. And I also teach at the University of Northern BC. I'm a senior instructor there in the School of Education. And with that, I will turn it over to Alicia to tell you a little bit about Dyslexia Canada and herself.
Thanks. So I'm Alicia Smith. I'm the Executive Director of Dyslexia Canada. And Dyslexia Canada is a national charity. Our mission is to ensure that every child with dyslexia receives a fair and equitable education. And we consider there are four main things that we need to do to make sure that that happens. The first is making sure that every child gets early reading instruction that is aligned with the findings of the science of reading. So evidence-based, early foundational skills instruction. The second piece is universal early screening. So making sure that we're using evidence-based tools to identify students who are at risk for experiencing reading difficulties due to dyslexia or due to any other reason. The third piece is effective intervention. So making sure that all of those children who are at risk or who are experiencing difficulties are receiving support in the public education system. And then the fourth piece is teacher training. And so all of these pieces really come together very nicely through this workshop series. And I'm very excited and happy that Melanie has agreed to host this. And we have a whole crew of wonderful volunteers from BC who've gone into participating in planning this. So thank you to all of them as well. And with that, back to you.
So the purpose and goals of this workshop series, let's take a moment to review those. So we want to connect educators who are interested in improving equity and literacy outcomes across BC. We know that there are a number of us out there, and we have different platforms. That this is the first real organized activity that's meant to bring us all together, and hopefully the first of many to come. It's the first of a series of 4, but my vision is that this will be something that we can continue doing as things progress here. And we want to celebrate the success that people are experiencing around the province. We know that there's a lot of really important, amazing work going on, and so it's an opportunity for us to share what we're doing, and to identify common challenges and share strategies for overcoming barriers. For all the successes, we know that there's still a lot of hurdles out there, and it's going to take collective effort to work through those. We want to also empower educators in BC to lead change within their sphere of influence, and that may look different depending on the roles that we have and the types of barriers that we face in our different communities and school settings. And then the other goal is, of course, to help Dyslexia Canada understand the needs of BC educators so that it will inform their advocacy and help them to be able to further support our work. So what do we know so far? Here's the good news. We have a very active community of educators who are very interested in science-informed instruction, or the science of reading, whatever you want to call it. Evidence-based practices that are founded in scientific understandings. And so the British Columbia Science of Reading Facebook group, I've been a member for a couple of years, and I've watched it grow, and it has doubled. It's in the time that I joined in 2022. It has jumped from 1,500 to over 3,000 members. So I think that is a reflection of the interest in this and the dedication of educators to keep learning and connecting. The other thing I want to acknowledge is that we had over 400 people register for these workshops, and that is incredible. And that was the last time we checked, so we don't know. Hopefully it'll keep growing as the word gets out about this series, and we'll see it continue to grow. So definitely there's a strong interest in learning this information, and I think that's just a testament to BC educators and being committed to professional development. So it is not all, unfortunately, sunshine and rainbows in the land of literacy in BC. We do have some bittersweet news as well, some not so great news. And so this is from the survey that I think probably many people in the sessions did. If you haven't had a chance to do it, I believe it's still open. Alicia can correct me on that. Yeah, she's nodding. Good. It's still open, so you can still, we'll share that link out and make sure people know where to access that survey if you haven't done it. But at the time it was, this data was collected, there was about 350 teachers, just under 350 teachers that had replied. And so of those teachers, 59% were finding that they had not been offered professional development to learn about the science of reading in their school or their district. So we're hoping to see that shift. But then, you know, the bittersweet, there's 59% or 41% of people who have been offered that. And I think if we had done this survey even 2 years ago, those numbers would have looked quite different. So I'm a glass half full kind of gal. So I try to see the bright side. And then this is another question on the survey that came out. I've been learning about science of reading on my own time and my own dime. And I think this is where probably a lot of us live, and the data certainly showed that. 90% of the respondents, this was the case for them. The lucky 10%, I want to find out what districts they're in. So good for them. That's fantastic. But yeah, so hopefully, but again, 90% of people are committed to doing this, even if they have to do it on their own time and their own dime. So that to me, again, speaks volumes about how much BC educators care. The other thing that's not so great is around the issue of equity in our schools. And so these questions kind of pertain to that. So overall, there's about 40% of educators that are concerned. They don't feel necessarily that their students are doing very well in reading and writing. And when it comes to how equitable the outcomes are in regard to literacy in their district, the numbers are even more bleak. So I'll let the graphs speak for themselves there. So again, looking at it from a silver lining kind of thing, the important thing, what I take away from these graphs is that we have to identify what the problem is in order to address it. And so there is a recognition among BC educators that things aren't equitable, and that fuels a desire to change. So I think that is a silver lining that we can hang on to. So this is a picture a graph that really speaks volumes to me, being somebody who went through teacher training and now someone who's involved in teacher training. So of the 347 respondents, the question was, how well do you feel your initial university training program prepared you to teach children who struggle to read? And there are a very small percentage who felt that they were well prepared, very well prepared, or well prepared. The majority of people were feeling that they weren't prepared very well at all. So that is hopefully something that is fixable, that we can change. And again, once we know what the issue is, it helps us to be able to address it. And if we use a problem-solving model, I really, truly do believe that we will get there. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Alicia for a moment to talk about this QR code and what it means.
Excellent. Okay. So we love active participation in everything we do. So this is a link to a Mentimeter where there are some questions. So if you can scan this with a phone, or you can type in the URL that's there. If you go to menti.com, you can put that in, or I'm going to actually stop the share and then pull up the Menti presentation. And on there's a shorter link that you can type in with a code. So just bear with me for a moment and I'll get that started. The fun thing about Mentimeter is that you can see in real time as people are answering. So we'll give this one a second. Oops. Sorry. There we go. Okay. The first one. Is this the question that everybody's getting? Yes. Okay. The first question, how open to learning about the science of reading are your immediate colleagues? So by this, we're talking about the people that you work with every day in your buildings, your principal, your fellow educators, that sort of thing. So it's looking like we've got a mix of, enthusiastic. I think the largest is that they're somewhat interested. They're open to talking about it, but they're not really seeking out information at this point. That seems to be where this is landing. We'll just give this another second as people are filling it in, and then I'll move on to question number 2. There, it looks like it stopped moving. There we go. So I'd say somewhat interested is definitely the overwhelming answer here. There's only a very small fraction there that are actually really not interested at all, or stop talking or stick their fingers in their ears when you start talking. Question number 2 is, how do you feel your district leadership is supportive of your efforts to learn about the science of reading? So now we're not talking about the people in your immediate building. We're talking about your district literacy teams, superintendents, that level of individuals. This is interesting. This is very different than the colleagues in your own building. That's the first thing that I notice here that's quite striking.
Yeah, I was curious to see how this one was going to turn out.
Yeah, okay. This one looks like it stopped moving as well. So we'll give this another second, but it's very interesting information is sure. The other thing that I notice about this that's interesting is there's more blue on this one as well than in the immediate building. So that I think that's positive. There's more blue and there's more red. So there's more extreme at the district level. That's interesting. Okay, and then our third question is around the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Education and Childcare. So how or do you feel the ministry is supportive of educators' efforts to learn about the science of reading? Let's see what color we can turn this one. I'm watching it go. That's an awful lot of red.
Hmm. And we recognize that the Ministry of Education is not one person. People may have different experiences depending on who they've interacted with and how they've interacted with those individuals. So it's very broad and it could be meaning different things to different people.
It certainly could. And with an organization with a lot of different people in it, sometimes it can be difficult to turn that ship around, right? But interestingly, the further we got away from your immediate sphere, the more red we're seeing, right? So that's an interesting trend that I see here.
Yes.
So, great. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop the share there, and we're going to go back to our knowledge building section.
So what is the science of reading? There's a lot of misconceptions out there about what the science of reading is. So we've gone to a very reliable source to get a great definition. And it starts out like this. The science of reading is a vast interdisciplinary body of scientifically based research about reading and issues related to reading and writing. The research has been conducted over the last 5 decades across the world, and it is derived from thousands of studies conducted in multiple languages. So the science of reading borrows from multiple fields. It doesn't borrow, sorry, it is built on research that is done in a number of different fields. Yeah. Okay. All right. The other thing we want to talk about is the types of evidence that we find in the science of reading and that we find out there in the world of education. Somebody's asking for the reference for the definition. I believe the link was on the slide, and they'll have access to the slides.
Yes, the link is in the slides. The slides will be in a Google Drive that we're going to be sharing with you shortly, but everyone will have that. It was from the Reading League's defining guide.
Yeah. Great. Great question, though. Okay, so when we're thinking about evidence, we want to there's a
yes, because Grandpa and Nana.
Somebody's not muted. You could mute yourselves. Thank you. Yeah, so when we're thinking about the science of reading, we want to think about the types of evidence that we have. And in the world of education, all kinds of evidence is valuable and it has a purpose and a place. One of the most common types of evidence that we see is around personal experience and anecdotal experience. And that's really important for informing your immediate practice to know what kind of impact you're having on the students in front of you. And it is in terms of the strength of evidence that we find, it is not the strongest, but it is important, and it's probably the most frequent that we tend to experience in education. So we can go on to the next level. And then close to that is expert opinion. So when you are a person who has done has a lot of experience in your field, you've done a lot of your own knowledge building through formal education or other types of education, you can become an expert on that topic. And we do have experts in our educational community here in British Columbia and beyond, people that we tend to look to. But again, if their information is based on their opinion, they may have informed opinions, but it may not be as broad or as strong as some of the higher levels of or forms of evidence that we can see. So in the next level, the case study, correlational study, quasi-experimental design, and experiments, those have a stronger level of evidence than the lower part of this triangle that is slowly building. So if you aren't familiar with what each of those terms are, I did have definitions here, but I'm not going to have time to go through them all. There's a link at the bottom of the page there where you can watch a fantastic free webinar to learn all about these different types. And then at the very top of the pyramid, we have systematic review and meta-analysis. So those are using statistical techniques to look at studies that are psychometrically sound. They're valid studies. They're information that we gather. We use specific criteria to determine whether or not those studies should be included in a systematic review or a meta-analysis, and those give us quite strong evidence to help guide our practice. So when we think about making decisions, educational or instructional decisions, we want to make sure that we are informed across this triangle, but really looking at the top of the pyramid to make sure that when we're making decisions about establishing policies and things like that, we are gathering evidence from types of evidence that are very, very strong. So that is, we can move on to the next slide. So our last part of the definition of what is the science of reading, the science of reading has culminated in a preponderance of evidence to inform how proficient reading and writing develop, why some have difficulty, and how we can most effectively assess and teach, and therefore improve student outcomes through prevention of and intervention for reading difficulties. So the science of reading is a collection of a body of knowledge. It isn't one thing, it isn't one program, it isn't one approach, and it certainly is not just phonics. So let's move on to the next slide. So what does the science of reading tell us? So Reid Lyon is a reading researcher who has been around for a very long time doing work in this field, and he has kind of taken all of the reading research and summed it up into 10 maxims or 10 big takeaways that we can glean from this fifth body of knowledge from different sources of research. So the first maxim is that almost all children learn to speak naturally, and reading and writing must be taught. So this relates to the concepts of things being biologically secondary or biologically primary. Learning to speak is a biologically primary skill, whereas reading and writing have to be taught. Now, we will need various levels of intensity with that teaching and with that instruction along a continuum, and that is just a variation of being human. So reading and writing, though, must be taught. It's not something we will just develop like walking or learning how to, swallow and things like that. Literacy begins at birth. It is rooted in early social interactions and experiences that include regular exposure to oral language and print. Strong roots tend to produce stronger readers. So we need to make sure that we are talking to kids, that we are really giving them good exposure to print, reading to them, talking to them, using varied language, and speaking to kids in their first languages if they are not English speakers or French speakers. Encouraging their language in whatever their language is at home as well is really important. All good readers are good decoders. Decoding should be taught until children can accurately and independently read new words. So there isn't we often think about grade levels or reading levels. We need to really think about the individual skills that are involved with reading, and decoding is definitely a key skill. And it doesn't matter if you are in kindergarten or grade 3 or grade 10 or grade 12, or if you are beyond school. If you struggle with decoding, you will struggle with reading, and you can learn to become a more fluent decoder at any age. So we have to let go of some of these beliefs that we have around certain things needing to happen by a certain time. We need to continue to help kids and students develop those skills all the way through. Okay. Number 3 is a long one. Decoding is important. Decoding depends on phonemic awareness, which is a child's ability to identify the individual speech sounds. And decoding is an on-ramp for word recognition. So we need to recognize the sub-skills that get kids to become fluent decoders, and that's a key part of that maxim. Number 4 is related to fluency. Fluent readers can instantly and accurately recognize most words in a text. They can read with expression and at an appropriate rate for their age. Reading fluency requires comprehension and it supports comprehension. So one of the things that we're looking at when we talk about screeners, oral reading fluency is one of those key important measures that is a foundational skill, tells us very quickly if kids are on track with their reading, and it is, like it says, very, very important for reading comprehension. So that's a key thing to look for in screeners, which we'll be talking about later in the series. And then the fifth maxim is all about comprehension, which is the goal of reading. Nobody is disputing that. That is the ultimate place that we want kids to be able to get, that they can pick something up and make sense of it. And there's a recognition from from all of the research that comprehension draws on multiple skills and strengths, including a solid foundation of vocabulary and background knowledge. So there is definitely a sense here that there's far more to reading than just decoding words. There's an expression, and I do not know who said it, but oral language, reading floats on a sea of oral language, right? Literacy floats on a sea of oral language. So we need to make sure that we are building vocabulary and background knowledge alongside with word recognition or word decoding skills. The sixth maxim is that one size does not fit all. One of the things that we hear often is that the science of reading is a phonics program, or it is one type of a scripted program that everybody gets no matter what kind of skills they're demonstrating and what kind of needs they have. Nothing could be further from the truth. When you are using scientific information to guide your instruction, it means you're using student data to differentiate your instruction. And when it's done well, you rarely will see certain activities that are delivered whole group, if that fits with your particular class. But very often, instruction is very, very differentiated, and it needs to be, because kids develop at different rates. And we know that learning takes a lot of patience and a lot of time. So let's keep going. Direct systematic instruction helps students develop the skills they need to become strong readers. Indirect 3-cueing instruction is unpredictable in its impact on word reading, and it leaves too much to chance. The research is really clear about this, and there may be some students who can learn through 3-cueing instruction, but that is in spite of that instruction. It's not because of it. So we need to really make sure that we are looking closely at the research and helping kids to keep their eyes on the word, which is the best cue to the word. Number 8, these maxims apply to English learners and emergent bilinguals as well, who often need extra support to bolster their oral language as they learn to read and write in a new language. Definitely structured literacy and this type of instruction is geared to be able to be adapted across cultures, and it certainly should be. And the 9th maxim, we should support students who speak languages other than English at home by honoring their home language and by giving them expanded opportunities to engage with English text. So language revitalization is very, very important in Indigenous, First Nations, Métis, Inuit communities, and we need to make sure we are focusing on that. And any other languages that students speak at home, it is key to make sure that they're building their language in their home language as well, and that will support them and help them when they're learning English text as well. And there's a question there, could someone explain what is meant by 3-cueing system? I'm just going to take a moment and just briefly explain that, because it is an important concept. So 3-cueing is a strategy that is used all across British Columbia. I've reviewed multiple files from kids all over and all across the world. And it comes from a belief or a theory of learning to read that students can also learn words by looking at context, using context and looking at pictures to help them to understand what words are. So we can cue students if they're stuck on a word to think about the context, for example, right? Yes, does it look right? Does it sound right? Does it make sense? So anytime you see those cues or you see different images like Chunky Monkey or Skippy Frog and those types of things, they're cues that allow the student another means other than actually decoding the word to figure out what the word is. So when we teach students cueing strategies to help them figure out what words are, that actually impedes their ability to develop the word decoding skills that they need to become automatic. And the research is really, really clear about that. Yeah, using the first letter.
I
Lots of
think
people are adding things
I'm
into
just
the
going to
chat.
jump in and I'm just going to jump in and add one more thing there around the definition of 3Q. In that the issue there is the idea of using those strategies, the context, the syntax to identify the word, right?
Yes.
So if you're dealing with if you're dealing with the wind and wind, for example, that's one that often comes up, you've already identified using the letters that it could be wind, it could be wind. That is very different than using context to guess, without identifying the word based on the letters first. So you absolutely, students need to use context and they need to use syntax to understand the meaning of the word. What we're talking about is identifying words that they can't decode yet, or they have not automatized. So that is just the difference. And that's, I feel like, one area where there is sometimes some confusion and some dispute over the validity of, when we say we don't want kids to use context, we don't mean that we don't want kids to use context to identify the meaning of words. It's just to actually identify what the word is.
Yes, absolutely. Using context to help with comprehension is absolutely critical. Absolutely critical. And that is something that is supported when you use a science-informed approach, a structured literacy approach. Thanks. Okay, so a little detour there. Number 10, to become good readers and writers, students need to integrate many skills that are built over time. So just like we were talking about, reading comprehension is the goal, but it is a culmination of a lot of different skills that weave together, as it's shown in models like Scarborough's rope, and they build over time. So it's not a one and done thing. We don't give a program and students are now all suddenly reading. This develops over many, many years. All throughout the school years and even beyond. Okay. All right, so to sum it up, the science of reading is not an ideology or a philosophy. One of the things that ruffles my feathers a lot is the notion that somehow this is something to do with politics, and nothing could be further from the truth. It is not a fad, a trend, a new idea, or a pendulum swing. If you're following the science, what you do will shift as the science emerges and new information comes out. And we do the best we can based on the knowledge and the information that we have at that time. But there shouldn't be wide swinging of different approaches if we are consistently following the science. It's not a political agenda, as mentioned. And it is definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach. Done well, it should be highly differentiated. And it is not a program of instruction or scripted curriculum. It is multiple different types of fields of study coming together to help inform our instruction, but it is not one scripted program or curriculum. We hear lots of these arguments out there. It's not a single specific component of instruction either, such as phonics. It is many just different strands all woven together in order to develop language, vocabulary, background knowledge, syntax knowledge, all of these things coming together with word recognition skills, which includes phonemic awareness. Yeah. All right, so we are going to break out into our group activity, and I just want to talk a little bit about what will be involved with that. So first of all, the breakout rooms will be automatically assigned. If you can please introduce yourselves, we will encourage cameras to be turned on to promote dialogue. Eye contact helps for sure. You will get a link to open a Google folder, and the link will be provided in the chat, and you will choose the Jamboard with your room number that you are assigned. Now, a Jamboard, if you've never used one before, I think Alicia was going to do a quick demo of that. I'm not sure if we've still got time. We want to just hope people figure it out. And there are three questions.
Skip the demo.
Yeah.
Just open up your Jamboard. It's pretty straightforward.
It is very straightforward.
I'm sure somebody in your room will have experience with it.
Exactly. People can help you out with it. Yeah, and you've got 20 minutes for the discussion. There are 3 questions. Everyone's encouraged to record the responses on the group Jamboard, and that will be shared back with us, which will be great. So just remember a few norms. Everyone is on their own learning journey, so please create space for everyone to learn and join in. Contribute to the conversation by speaking up, taking up some space, and remember that others need space too. Be cognizant of the different experiences. Consider what you can learn from engaging others' viewpoints. In others' viewpoints, engage critically with the content and do not allow your first thought to be your only thought. Engage critically. Oh, I read that one already. And know that growing and learning means that you may shift your positions, revisit your assumptions, and advance your thinking. Learning is often uncomfortable, but this is a safe space, and we want to make sure that everybody's feeling supported. So yes, turn your cameras on as a way to create more space for people, and we'll let you get to it. So we are at the point now. I just want to welcome everybody back from the discussion groups. I trust that there was some great information and ideas shared and some fabulous connections were made. So remember, this is just the first part of many great discussions to come. So if you rejoin us for the other sessions that are coming up, we will have more opportunities to connect with educators who are in the series. So I do hope to see everybody back and then some. So now, without further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce our guest panelists for this evening. From the First Nations School Board of the Yukon, I would like to welcome Melissa Flynn, the Executive Director, Megan Norris, Lead Literacy Coach, Angela Gale, Literacy Coach, and Terry Gordon, Early Years Coordinator. So to kick us off, would you each be able to tell us a little bit about yourselves?
Tata Hozo Dyslexia, Shojre Melissa Flynn, Trondikwichinn Diche, Whitehorse Huchin, First Nation School Board, Ha Tredahokai. My name is Melissa Flynn. I was born and raised in Dawson City, Yukon. I am a Trondikwichinn citizen, and I have the honor and privilege of having the responsibility of being the executive director for this very newly formed First Nation School Board. We're in our second year of supporting 11 schools in the Yukon. Ni Dache Shotrin Lai. I'm very happy that everyone is here tonight.
Hi, everybody. My name is Megan Norris. It's great to be here with all of you today. I was born and raised on Treaty 6 territory in Métis Nation 4 in central Alberta, the traditional territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, Nakota Sioux, and Métis people. I'm the great-great-granddaughter of European settlers with English, Dutch, and Irish roots. I'm a trained teacher and speech language pathologist. I worked for a number of years as a tutor, and that's when I really developed a passion and a love for literacy. About 3 years ago, I moved to Whitehorse, and about a year and a half ago, started working with the First Nation School Board as the literacy team lead. It is such an honor and a privilege to have the opportunity to make such an impactful change for our learners and learn so much from our schools and our communities in the process.
And my name is Terry Gordon, and I grew up in Southwest Saskatchewan on a farm located on Treaty 4 territory. My ancestors were English and Scottish. I trained as a speech language pathologist in North Dakota, and I spent time in Arizona and North Carolina before coming back to Canada. I spent time also in Northern Saskatchewan supporting learners and families in Cree and Dene communities. And I moved to the Yukon 3 years ago. And I now work as the early years literacy coach, supporting learners in our 4-year-old and 5-year-old kindergarten programs. And I get to support play, language, and literacy in the school and in the community, which is really very exciting for me to be able to do.
Hello, my name is Angela, and I'm originally from Newfoundland. I moved to the Yukon about 30 years ago with my husband, and we raised our 3 children in several Yukon communities. Earlier in my teaching career, I had the opportunity to do my Wilson reading system training, and that really defined how I taught students to read and write for many years. I've worked with lots of students who struggle with reading or had learning disabilities, and explicit direct instruction. I had so much success with that. I'm super passionate about teaching students to read. I work with the school board for a year now, and my job is to support teachers to help students learn to read in the classroom. And it's an awesome job. I love it.
It sounds like an amazing place to live and work. And I really appreciate each of you sharing who you belong to who your roots are, where your roots are. And I think that's really important for building relationships. So thank you for sharing that. So recently, your school board made the official decision to switch to a structured literacy approach, a science-informed approach. Could you tell us about why that decision was made?
I can take this one to begin with. So a little bit of my background. My first degree was in Kamloops, BC. So everyone that's went to school at Thompson Rivers, good day. And then I did my education degree. I was also a PDP student, and I did not learn about the science of reading there either. I saw that as someone's comment. And so I came back to the Yukon, and I actually became the Han language speaker, which is the language that you heard me speaking earlier. In 2017, I was able and had the responsibility of being moved up into a vice principal position. I'd already seen in my community of Dawson City that students were struggling to read. And I was trying to identify why. I was trying to bring people together in our community. We do follow the BC curriculum still. I knew that there was a better way to meet the needs of our students. As we saw in some of the comments, there was a lot of teachers blaming the students' reading levels on absenteeism, life at home. There must not have been an adequate preschool program. If the parents just read to students a little bit more at home, then they would be better readers. So and then in 2022, when the First Nations School Board came to fruition and 8 schools voted yes to come on board, I entered into a space where I had the privilege of meeting Megan and Terry, and we started having conversations. And at that point, my understanding of a speech and language pathologist was speech. And so we'd worked with a lot of speech and language pathologists in our school that were working on sounds, oral sounds for students. And these two came in really excited about literacy. And so again, I'd made these observations in my school. I've seen the data across the Yukon, where our rural communities, our Yukon First Nations students, and our Yukon students as a whole had lower literacy rates than expected, lower literacy rates than we wanted our students to have. And so at that point, it's my responsibility as the executive director for the schools and supporting our learners making the best student-centered decisions. I went to the experts. And so I knew that change needed to happen. I've used it as a motto a lot in my life. Nothing changes until something changes. And so after more than one devastating Auditor General's report that came through the Yukon education system, where our students in the Yukon were not learning how to read, and no changes were being made. So 2009, we had a low score in our Auditor General's report. In 2019, there was no improvement. So at that point, we had a group of the Chiefs Committee on Education come together and start asking for change. We also have a FNEC, which is your BC equivalent to FNESC, a First Nations Education Commission. And they came with a lot of recommendations on improving literacy scores for our students. And so the decisions were easy for me. If we put students at the center of our decisions, we bring the experts into the room, and that's how this all came to be. We started putting our heads together, and it has been a privilege to work with this group of experts, making the best decisions for our learners in the Yukon.
That is amazing. Thank you so much for that comprehensive answer. It's really powerful. Like I think it's very motivating and inspiring to come from a place where there's been a lot of advocacy for a long time, and to see if a team comes together and there's a common goal and a vision and everybody's on board. It's just very encouraging and promising to hear that you can have that kind of turnaround, that kind of impact in such a short amount of time. So how's it going? What have you experienced? And has there been any pushback in terms of implementing something that is, scientific or structured in the context of a First Nations school board?
Maybe I'll start off by walking you through some of the changes that we made. So last school year, the 2022-23 school year, we mandated universal screening tools that our primary grade teachers administered. And then our literacy team has been providing teachers with support to understand the data and then use it to inform their classroom instruction. Starting last year, we also provided professional development for all of our staff about the science of reading, about how our brains learn to read, what is structured literacy, so that our staff had that foundation of understanding of why we are making these changes, and then they can critically look at the resources that they're using for themselves. Starting this school year, we, as you had mentioned, mandated that a structured literacy approach be used in our classrooms. So our primary grade teachers are implementing a 90-minute literacy block to teach the 5 pillars of reading, and UFly is being used for tiers 1 and 2. Many of our intermediate classrooms are also using UFly this year in tier 1 and tier 2 because many of these students didn't receive direct and explicit instruction and are struggling in reading and writing. A couple other changes I'll share. A big switch that we made was switching reading recovery teachers to being literacy teachers. Prior to this year, each of our schools had a full-time position for reading recovery. So we kept that FTE and transitioned this role to now being called a literacy teacher. And we trained these teachers to use structured literacy approaches in their small group and one-on-one interventions. And then the last change has been hiring our amazing team of coaches who are supporting our schools and our communities.
That is all fantastic. Yeah. Did you want to add anything there?
I did. I see wonderful questions coming through, and I think there's time at the end
yes.
to answer them. I see they're valid questions, so we won't jump in quite yet, but we will address them.
Yes.
I think it was important too. So in any change system, in supporting a staff, supporting families and learners through change, we knew that we wanted to build this team of support. And so that was really important. And so then we allocated funds and resources to building a team of coaches. We really liked that model. The Northwest Territories has used it for literacy and numeracy coaches through Jordan's Principal funding. And so we had heard about that. We asked questions. So right now we have a ratio of 1 coach per 2 or 3 schools. And our coaches are in the schools traveling probably once a month. 11 schools in the Yukon are not all in Whitehorse, Yukon. We have schools from Old Crow to Watson Lake to Beaver Creek to Ross River, Pelly Crossing. So we are on the road a lot. We have not bought a helicopter yet, but we're thinking about it. And so supporting that amount of schools in an authentic way, we really needed a bigger team to be able to reach out. And this isn't even the full team here sitting here today. We still have more members on the literacy team. And then we just, as a school board, we made a decision and mandated the change. And so again, nothing changes until something changes. And so with high support, we put the resources in. We had online support through the Center for Literacy out of Edmonton. They've been a huge support to us since the very beginning in tutoring and supporting our literacy teachers and our LATs, our learning assistance teachers. So there's lots of different ways that we wrapped around the school, creating and pushing this change and supporting this change. There was some pushback. Of course, we have balanced literacy and reading recovery are ingrained and a model that was loved and used for decades. But again, as you said before, Melanie, if you go to the data, our students weren't doing well. And so a change needed to happen. And the research, if we follow the research, then we have to change. As educators, we are lifelong learners. And so change is inevitable. and methods and pedagogies that we use are always going to change. And so supporting staff through that has been exciting and challenging sometimes. But when we hear and see the data that our students are doing better, no one can argue with that.
Yeah, that's so amazing. There's so many things. It's just leading to more questions, but I'm not the only one here. We need to let others ask questions. Before we move into the questions from the chat, though, what's coming up next? What kind of results have you been seeing? And is that going to drive or shift anything that you might do differently next year?
Hi, I just wanted to show a couple of slides here about the impact.
Oh, yes, please, please.
Has had. It's a short little clip of a grade 1-2 classroom. This is just a snippet of a UFly lesson.
Can everybody see?
Yeah.
Okay, you're repeating after me. Mat. Okay, next word. Super. Okay, that's just a little snippet of some phonemic awareness. The next slide is it's a quick assessment that any classroom teacher can do. It's a core phonics survey. It's free online. It's easy to use. The instructions come with it. This is a class in fall of 23 to the left. And then a comparison is to the right in spring 24. So on the left, you can see there's quite a bit more yellow and red. And on the right side, there's a lot more green. So green is mastery, yellow is you're on the right track, and red is not good. So this is one of the assessments along with a couple of other screeners we did to help make tier 2 groups. So we would look at the left-hand side, look at the kids all red, and it's easy. Those kids need tier 2. So it's a really good assessment for teachers to use and get a quick visual.
Yes, it is fantastic. I'm very familiar with it. It is not part of, there's a question in the chat. It's not part of UFly. It is readily available online. If you just search Core Phonics Survey, there's lots of different ways to access it. I'm sure we can put that link in for you as well. Somebody, I think, is already on it. Look at how amazing these people are. Yes, they're already on it in the chat. Thank you for sharing the visual. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so for what's next, this year we focused most on primary grades 1 to 3 and making mandates. Coming up in the fall, we are going to be hiring an intermediate coach to help with the intermediate grades 4 to 7. We'll be supporting with spelling and writing, and we'll also be supporting with tier 2 support.
We also have a couple of exciting projects that we would love to share about. So one of them being, we're working with each of our Yukon First Nations to localize the UFly passages. So there will be about 9 stories written with each First Nation. And then at the end, we will have a beautiful collection of stories from across the territory that our classrooms can use. And then our learners will have decodable passages with topics and themes and vocabulary that's relevant and meaningful to them. So that's really exciting. And then we are also hoping to roll out an oral reading fluency standardized assessment that will have passages with Northern content. So again, learners will be reading stories and then hopefully have that background knowledge and vocabulary that they need to read fluently. So yeah.
It's so fantastic. It just, my heart is like glowing. You can see it. Yeah, it's amazing. One of the things that we hear often in pushback in British Columbia is that what we are advocating for when we talk about structured literacy and the science of reading is that it isn't culturally responsive. And your example, the video and the example of where you're going with this really shows very clearly that once you have the scientific foundation understanding, it's the human brain is universal and language acquisition is universal, and that can be applied to different languages and different contexts. So having that knowledge base as educators is so, so critical. And you've just highlighted that beautifully. So thank you so much for that. Okay, I want to turn it over to the chat. And we've got some key questions. I don't know if my helpers, can you pull out a question or two and put it to our panel?
Sure, I'll jump in. So thanks for sharing that you're using the core phonics. People were asking if there are other screeners you're using as well.
Yeah, so one of the universal screening tools we're using is the TOWRE 2, so Test of Word Reading Efficiency. Second edition. And then we have been using the TOSRIF, Test of Silent Word Reading Efficiency. Fluency, thank you. And having said that, we are hoping to roll out our own oral reading fluency standardized assessments that would replace the TOSRIF.
Okay, so for anybody who's not familiar with those are two that are being used widely in Alberta. So you can find information about those on the Alberta Education website as well. There's more information about those. Those are the two that I know that George Giorgio from the University of Alberta kind of helped to roll out and pilot throughout Alberta. So it's great. And those do give standard scores as well. So you can see how the kids are doing on a standard score measure. A couple of other questions were coming in really about resistance. So you talked a little bit about, it's a lot of change, things have been ingrained. So really people, I think, are looking for suggestions on or information on how you managed that with educators, really. Have you continued to face resistance, or have you managed to bring people along? And in cases where you've had more challenges, how did you handle that?
I think that this is the team, the literacy team are the ones on the ground. As the executive director, I do hold that authority. And so putting the right people in the decision-making tables does help. And so once our First Nations school board as a whole made this decision, it was the change is happening. How do we help you get there? We did have resistance. We did have teachers behind the scenes still doing leveled reading books. We had a lot of questions. People wanted to know the why. Why are we doing this? They really believed in older approaches. And we used all sorts of tools. So from the board level, it was mandated. From the level of building relationships,
that's huge.
We went in with really a restorative circle practices. And so we coached our coaches here at the table in how do you enter into respectful conversations in a restorative circle method. And so I think that was probably huge.
Yes, it's all about building relationships with the teachers. It's the most important part of the job is having a relationship with the teacher. Keep going back, keep checking in, send emails, send texts, do school visits. Now it's the end of the year, and now when I send an email, I sent an email today, and pretty much every single person I sent an email to replied within 10 minutes. So it's great.
Yeah.
So I have the relationship now. So next year it will be easier.
Mm-hmm.
That is really impressive in May, just saying. In May, to get an email response in 10 minutes is impressive by anyway. Sorry, go ahead.
I was also going to say that we did give some responsibility to the principals in their role as instructional leaders. And so we supported the principals in moving into the classrooms as well and doing observations, positive feedback, checking in to see how the teachers were doing with the rollout.
Mm-hmm. And actually that core phonics survey is super helpful because the resistant teachers are looking at the data. It's right in front of them, and it just helps them come on board when they've got that data.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also important to say that every single teacher enters into this profession for a reason. We all love children and we want the best for our children. And so if we just remind teachers that we're all lifelong learners and our practices are going to change over decades. And so it's that high support, positivity, and relationship building.
Yeah, no shame, no blame, just train. That's what I say.
That's
yes.
excellent.
Open hearts and open minds. Is there another question from the chat?
Yeah, there are a few.
I know there are many. I'm watching
about, other schools in the Yukon. So it's at other school boards in the Yukon, but I think you are the First Nation school board. There's really only one other school board. So really, have the changes that you've been making within your board really been filtering out and getting the attention of the schools that are part of the Department of Education, or have there been generalized changes?
So there are 3 authorities in the Yukon, the First Nation School Board. We support 11 schools. There's the French School Board. They support about 3 schools. They've been established since 1998. And then there are Department of Education run schools. And so there are still a large number of schools supported by the department. Department of Education has recently come out with a statement that they will be moving towards structured literacy as well.
Oh, that's fantastic news. I hadn't heard that statement, so I'm really glad. I was wondering how it would go if I was in a community in the Yukon and I was looking over at what you were doing over there, and my kids were in a school that wasn't doing that. I might be knocking on the door and asking for that. So it sounds like that might have happened. So you led that change. Amazing. There's a few more questions in there. People are asking about the scope and sequence you're using, and it sounds like you're using UFly. And there were some comments in there saying, well, that comes from the States. They have a very different kind of kindergarten program. Is it too advanced? How are you finding that for your kindergarten and grade 1 students?
That is something that we have been asking for feedback from our kindergarten teachers to see how it is working in the kindergarten classrooms. It's very different. So some of our kindergarten classrooms have 4-year-olds as well as 5-year-olds. It depends on the community and the school who is in that classroom. And so the rollout of UFly for kindergarten classrooms has looked very different for each community. So some have started right away in the fall because their kids were ready for that, and some started after Christmas. So it's very individualized to what the students in that classroom need. We're still following the steps in UFly, step 1 to step 8, and it just might look different on the length of time that the students are able to sit in the class. Like it might just be a 10-minute, each couple times a day. They might have to break it up, more movement activities built into that as well. They don't move from day 1 to day 2, like they do day 1 for a couple days in a row and then move on to day 2. So it's a slower rollout in some classes. It really depends on what the students, what they're able to do at that time.
And we'll be supporting teachers in using their assessment results in the fall to figure out what that instruction should look like, and if UFly is what's being started right away or not.
Well, it sounds like the UFly provides a curriculum and a foundation, but you still have to have your knowledge of your students, and it's that merger of the science informed but relationship focused, right? You have to know your students, you have to understand them in order to know what to change and when and how.
Yeah. And also for kindergarten, looking at, and the K4 program, looking at play, oral language, phonological awareness, like those are huge pieces that are also happening, not just UFly, right? Like real language, book conversations, all of those pieces, really looking at all 5 pillars.
Yeah, and then I just I'll ask one more question, I think, and then we should probably wrap it up because I realize we're kind of at the time already that I said I would let everyone go to sleep, or I'm in Ontario, so it's very late for me, but it's, you guys can stay up a little bit later where you are. But Melanie really kind of asked about this a little bit, and you mentioned a few things when you were talking, but I wanted to give you a chance to sort of directly respond to one of the arguments that has been floating around in BC quite a lot, and in opposition to transitioning to the science of reading and structured literacy. And that is, again, the argument goes that structured literacy by definition is not culturally appropriate. and is not appropriate for First Nations students. So I would just wanted to give you a chance to respond to that, if that was said to you, or if that has that been said to you, and how would you respond?
I think this one's a hard one to answer. It is because I think people are asking it for maybe different reasons. So I'll go to my first one that goes straight and touches my heart. And normalizing low expectations in our reading levels for our Indigenous students is colonial. So keeping the status quo in how we are teaching students when it's not meeting the needs of our Indigenous students is colonial. And so being curious and following the research on how our kids best learn is the best way to address that. So bringing up the learning and the literacy skills of our Indigenous kids is a huge part of reconciliation in this country. I think some people are asking because a structured literacy is everyone sitting in desks or seated and everyone doing just as Angela's demonstration showed, or everyone goes to Wilson, the very structured classrooms. Oh, these guys have the best imaginations, and classroom teachers make this fun. I was just at an outdoor education conference in Banff with Take Me Outside, and I had a whole afternoon of science of reading outside, and I learned tons. And so I think that that if that is the question of, is this everyone sitting in classrooms all doing exactly the same things, then there's lots of different ways to teach this.
Thank you. I think that was an excellent answer to that question. And I'm going to flip it back to Melanie. We should probably wrap it up, but before everybody goes, we do have a prize. So please stay with us for just a couple more minutes. And we will introduce our prize sponsor. So,
yes, let's share that screen again. I think the next slide is a QR code that takes people to the First Nations Yukon Board Literacy Plan, which I think is a fantastic resource and could be used for any provinces that may want to shift and may need an exemplar to look at. Perhaps that might be an idea. Yeah, excellent. Okay, so there's the QR code for anyone who's interested in that. And then we can move on to the next slide whenever we're ready. And we will announce our winner. So, there we are.
Here we are. Karen Shepard, and I believe we have Topher here joining us from Strong Nations Publishing.
Oh, perfect. Okay, thank you. So yeah, hello everyone. I want to thank Alicia and Dyslexia Canada and all of you for welcoming Strong Nations Publishing to participate and learn today. My name is Topher. My traditional name is Sibakola, and I'm the manager of publishing at Strong Nations. Strong Nations is located on the traditional unceded territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nations people. I'm excited to share some information about our upcoming decodable reading series that we are working on with the support of Dyslexia Canada and Alicia. As an Indigenous-owned and operated publishing house that specializes in children's books, we know how essential it is for kids to see positive representation of Indigenous culture in their literature. So we're very proud to share this in an accessible format for kids who are just learning to read. Cedar School Decodable series consists of 20 books that share outdoor learning and Indigenous teachings. Author Emma Metallic brings her Mi'kmaq knowledge to every plot-forward book, and Métis illustrator Natalie Lorne captures it in full color. The series can align with the UFly in its scope and sequence, but can also support any structured literacy approach and goes along with our Strong Readers series and our Strong Science series to support early learning. 4 non-decodable picture books will accompany the series. These read-alouds expand on the adventures at Cedar School and share additional Indigenous teachings. Our comprehensive teacher's guide will provide lesson plans and Indigenous cultural connections for each book. The goal of this guide is not to teach decodable reading, as we know educators will have their own structured literacy resources, but will instead help educators bring Indigenous knowledge and outdoor learning into their classrooms. We are so grateful to Dyslexia Canada, and Alicia and Valdine have provided invaluable feedback to ensure each book is a worthwhile resource for students and educators. We'll have review copies available sometime in June, and we are planning for a fall 2024 release. We've shared a flyer with Alicia. Hopefully she can pass this on to anyone interested in more information, or possibly I could share it in the chat. It's just a PDF. Is that something I could do?
Absolutely. Please pop it in the chat, and I'll put it in the shared Google Drive for everybody as well.
Perfect. Okay. I'm just gonna try to do that really quickly here. Hopefully it works no problem. I have sent it. It just says it's downloading, so it should be up in a moment. Yeah, so for those of you who don't know much about Strong Nations Publishing, we are a publishing house as well as an online bookstore. We carry upwards of 5,000 books, giftware, and educational resources. And as Alicia mentioned, we are giving away a gift certificate of $100, and the winner, I believe, was already announced. But yeah, thank you for having me, and Gila Costa.
Thank you very much, Topher. Can I ask you a question before you disappear? Do you have any plans to develop work with any artists and Indigenous authors from British Columbia?
Currently at this time, the series will be done by them, but as we look to continue expanding our offerings, then yeah, we might look for different regions or different artists and illustrators and authors from different locations.
Fantastic. I have lots of people that I could refer to you. Amazing artists and minds here we have in British Columbia as well too. I look at this as a fantastic start. This is just the beginning, and I'm just so thrilled that you shared it and taken the time to be with us today. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you again for donating that generous prize. I hope that the person whose name was on that slide is here still. Please email us at info@dyslexiacanada.org, and we will make sure that you get that gift certificate. And I want to thank everyone from the First Nations School Board in the Yukon for joining us for that wonderful discussion. And thank you, Melanie, for hosting this session. Our next session will take place next week on Wednesday, same time, same place. And I hope that we will see you all again then. Thank you for joining us.